welcome everybody for joining us today. ARC Medical is one of the most exciting life sciences companies we've seen. What ARC does is they significantly improve surgical patient recovery by preventing internal adhesions, which happen to be the most common complication in knee, shoulder, gynecological, and abdominal surgeries. Some of the key investment considerations are that obviously the company's playing in a huge market with a TAM of about $11 billion annually. Excellent efficacy and clinical data for the company's lead products for knee and shoulder surgeries. Very strong intellectual property protection, multiple patents granted, provides exclusivity for the company's products through 2039 and beyond. Great fundraising traction as well. ARC has already raised 39 million, which is probably a little more than that right now. I guess we'll hear about that in a second, but about 21 million in equity and 18 million in non-dilutive revenue and grants. They are planning to close the current round within a matter of weeks. Unicorn level exit potential. So that would be a 20x return based on comparable companies in the wound healing area. And last but not least, a world-class team that has designed, developed multi-billion-dollar products for companies including Johnson & Johnson, Stryker, Smith & Nephew, Amgen, and Moderna, to name a few. And to kick things off, I'd like to introduce you guys to Andrew Ray, who is an investor in ARC and also the lead on fundraising. So with that, let me turn things over to Andrew. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you, Chen, and nice to meet everybody today. Excited about this opportunity. Invested in the last round of financing for ARC. Made a six-figure investment. I've known Chris for multiple decades. We took Chris's company, former company, Angiotech, public back in 1997. That company achieved $2 billion in peak sales. So happy to meet everybody. And with that, without any further ado, I'll introduce you to Chris Springate, ARC's CEO.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon. And Tien, thanks for that summary. Like, we should just have you go and do the 60-second pitch every time. It was great, man. It's so succinct. I love it. I love it. So I'm going to keep this pretty casual. What I'll do for folks, some of the folks have seen us present before. For some folks, this will be new. So I'll go through it at a high level. If you have questions, please just go off mute, shout out, what your question is. Alternatively, you can put it in the chat, and then I would ask either Emily or Avery if you can just keep an eye on that chat. And if there's a question, just interrupt me. Let's deal with the questions as we go through the slides here. I use the slides just to give you a little more information as compared with what I'm saying, and let's get started. So I believe everybody can see the title slide here clearly.
Yes.
And yeah, great. And Lowell, great to see you again too.
Great to see you. And by the way, Tien, it could not have been better. I agree. Tien is a very smart guy. I love him.
Yeah. It was like I was as an investor as well. I was just kind of ticking the boxes there, Tien, as you were going through that. So look, as Tien said, I'm the CEO for ARC Medical. So Chris Springate was very fortunate, as Andrew mentioned, in the previous company, was really lucky to be a member of the team that designed and developed the stent, which was partnered with Boston Scientific. They launched that. We took that market away from Johnson & Johnson. We had over $2 billion in sales at peak sales. It was just an amazing outcome. So now today at ARC, what we're doing is working on another unicorn company, different indication, yet a very simple, elegant solution at the end of the day. We're improving surgical patient outcomes, including their mobility, their fertility, by preventing internal scars, internal adhesions that form inside the body after common surgeries. We direct you to our disclaimer. And these are large markets. So we see total addressable markets as over 11 million patients yearly, over $11 billion in potential annual sales for total addressable markets. And we have some really compelling clinical data. So at the bottom here, you'll see we did an initial safety clinical trial, 76 healthy volunteers in which we proved out the safety of our medical devices. Under compassionate use approvals, we've treated 20 orthopedic knee and shoulder patients, and we treated our first gynecological patient recently with really compelling efficacy data coming out of the compassionate use approvals. Intellectual property is incredibly strong. We have 7 separate patent families. They all have composition and matter claims. This provides us with exclusivity through 2039 and beyond. We're currently running a clinical trial separate from the data that I've just shown you. So Joe code for orthopedic, these are knee ACL repair surgery patients. We just treated the 8th patient last week. We've got the ninth patient scheduled for this week. That clinical trial is progressing quite nicely. We're about to initiate a gynecological, this is a deep endometriosis surgery clinical trial with our IP code. And so we have the ethics approval. We're now just waiting to get the regulator approval, and we expect to start that clinical trial in approximately June. So very clearly defined milestones. These clinical trials are pilots for the US, which is our primary market. Outside of the US, from these clinical trials, we expect to get approvals in places like Middle East, Europe, Australia, and Canada, and initiate sales towards the end of 2027. And so what is the most common surgical complication today? Indeed, it is these surgical adhesions. And the critical period is this first 5 days after the surgery, in which there's a lot of inflammation. And these adhesions are really a type of fibrous internal scar. They become permanent and cause havoc within the body. And so for an orthopedic patient, could be a knee or shoulder surgery patient. For shoulder patients, they often can't get their shoulder past about 90 degrees. So they can't change their shirt by themselves. They can't ride a stationary bike. So this is Jane, a woman in her 30s. Look, super active soccer athlete, physiotherapist. She had a common ACL, MCL knee repair surgery. She's doing all the physio as a physiotherapist, but she got stuck at 95 degrees. She couldn't bend her knee anymore. She couldn't even ride a stationary bike. So just to give you a sense of the issue here. And this is also a serious issue with gynecological abdominal surgeries. Over 30% of these patients have adhesions. Women undergoing a gynecological surgery often become infertile due to the adhesions. Any patient undergoing abdominal surgery can have the small bowel being obstructed by these adhesions, which is life-threatening because that bowel can then rupture. These patients have to come in for a very expensive emergency surgery to cut these adhesions apart after they form. And so focusing in on the SOM, the serviceable obtainable markets, or the go-to markets, we see within 5 years of launch, treating patients resulting in sales of over $1 billion annually. And these are our products. So we have Joco. It's a liquid medical device. It's a 10 ml pre-filled syringe. It's applied into the surgical site at the end of the surgery. It could be a knee or a shoulder. I'm just going to share a video. You can see this product being used in a shoulder surgery. All right, can folks see the video? It's inside the operating room, and the top left is the Joe-Coat 10 ml pre-filled syringe. Can anybody
Yes.
not see it? Yeah, great.
I see
Okay,
it.
so this is the Joe-Coat in the syringe. This is the end of a shoulder reoperation where the patient had had a previous surgery. They went in, they cut the adhesions apart by using an arthroscope. And so they're about to apply the Joco 10 mils liquid medical device into the patient. And so the metal you see, that's the arthroscope that they used to perform the surgery. The other end is still inside the joint. It's a standard attachment, and then it's just a push. And what we've shown through elegant radiolabel studies is following that application, the fluid, the liquid medical device, flows throughout the entire surgical cavity, provides a temporary physical barrier, and that prevents adhesions. It's biodegradable, so it's gone in 30 days. Super fast and easy to use, adds almost no additional workflow or time to the operating room. And so that's Joe-Coat, and then we have a similar product, which is called IP code for intraperitoneal. It's a larger volume. It's just 2 mils per kilogram. So 165-pound patient gets 150 mils. Very well tolerated, less than 2 minutes supply. Again, this is just a push. So it's easily used, whether it's an open surgery or a laparoscopic surgery. They just push it in through the laparoscope. So again, these first 5 days after the surgery are the critical period. Adhesions form during that time, if not prevented. And so what we've done here in this cartoon is we've colored the fluid dark blue. As you saw, it's actually clear. And again, we've shown through some elegant radiolabel studies following application, that fluid flows throughout the entire surgical site, provides this temporary physical barrier that prevents the adhesions and provides for really healthy healing. And so we've treated 20 shoulder and knee patients to date. Zero safety issues, very well tolerated. Patients have all recovered very well. The application went very smoothly. We already have efficacy data for the first 9 patients. We're showing 30 degrees or greater increase in that range of motion. And so this makes a significant difference for the patients. Coming back to Jane, she came in for a reoperation. They cut the adhesions apart in her knee. She was our very first patient. They put in 10 mils of the J-Coat liquid medical device at the end of the surgery. She went from only 95 degrees range of motion to over 135 degrees. She's now either trail running or riding her bike daily. And we have some compelling clinical data. So first of all, safety. We did a very large safety clinical trial, transabdominal injection into the abdominal pelvic cavity, and we showed that the IP coat and J-Coat are safe without or with the addition of enoxaparin sodium. We are currently running a knee clinical trial. This is a pilot for the US. It's a pivotal for territories outside of the US. In this clinical trial, we're treating 24 knee ACL repair surgery patients with J-Coat. They're being matched with 50 very recent historical controls that had the same surgery but didn't get the J-Coat. As I said, we just treated the 8th patient last week. We have the 9th scheduled this week. We expect top-line data at the end of Q3 this year. And we're about to initiate a gynecological deep endometriosis surgery patient clinical trial with our IP coat. So these are women coming in for the gynecological surgery. 22 patients get the IP coat, 11 patients receive a blinded placebo-controlled solution. They go back 12 weeks later, they do a second look laparoscopy during which they videotape the prevention and or the formation of the adhesions, and that's how we get the efficacy data. Again, this is a pilot for the US. It's a pivotal for approvals outside of the US. So competitive landscape, J-Coat for orthopedic, we actually have no direct competitors. The indirect competitors are comprised of expensive and painful procedures to either break or cut apart adhesions, but only after they form. And for IP coat, the most popular products are films. They're about the size of a Post-it note. They're placed into the abdominal cavity after abdominal or gynecological surgery. In the US, the films are only approved for open surgeries. The majority of the surgeries today, they are laparoscopic, so they're not actually approved for those laparoscopic surgeries. As a liquid, our product is easily applied through a laparoscope, again, flows throughout the entire abdominal pelvic cavity and prevents those adhesions. The other challenge with the films is they're very time consuming to apply. Surgeons, when they're using films following an abdominal gynecological surgery, will typically put about 4 films trying to get some better coverage, but they only end up covering a small area of the very large surface area within that abdominal pelvic cavity. So they're limited in their efficacy. They fail to prevent up to 75% of the adhesions, and they take 10 to 12 minutes to apply. We're very, as you saw in the video, very fast and easy to apply. So we're saving operating room time, which at $60 to $100 a minute in the operating room saves the hospitals and the ambulatory surgical centers money. Patents are very strong. We have 5 patents granted in the US. They all have composition of matter claims. Under patent term extension, we expect that last patent to expire in 2041 or later. Additional patents are granted worldwide. We have other patents that are pending and are expecting to grant in additional territories. We've done a lot to date. We've raised 22 million in equity, 18 million in non-dilutive. So as you can imagine, shareholders are really happy with a non-dilutive match. That's primarily from revenues, tax grants, and research and development grants as well. We run our own ISO 13485 certified as a GMP manufacturing facility where we chemically modify and ultra purify the high molecular weight polysaccharide, the high molecular weight polymer that is a key component of our liquid medical devices. We manufacture the finished sterile medical devices in the US with a contract manufacturer. And so this is the game plan here. We're currently working to obtain the top line pivotal trial clinical data. Again, these are pivotals for outside of the US and then come to the US and do the pivotals here. So this will be a larger financing for the pivotal clinical trials in the US. In the meantime, what we're doing right now is a smaller financing. It's $5 million. And we're using that to obtain really key outcomes here. Top-line data from the knee ACL clinical trial, top-line data from the gynecological endometriosis surgery clinical trial, and initiate approvals, distribution agreements, and sales outside of the US. This is our team. Allison Crow in the bottom right, fantastic VP clinical. She was instrumental in designing and running the clinical trials that resulted in approval and commercialization of 3 earlier generation anti-surgical adhesion medical devices. Robert Litchfield in the middle right there, just a great chief medical officer, and he leads a team of 15 surgeon and other key opinion leaders. All of these folks have recent relevant clinical trial experience. So we're very familiar with how these products are reimbursed. It ranges from under an umbrella diagnosis-related group to actually a direct payment from the payer to the ambulatory surgical center, depending on the product and the territory. And unit pricing is $1,000 for the IP coat for gynecological and abdominal, $2,000 for the Joe coat for the knees and shoulders. So it results in a profit margin of ARC ranging from $350 to $870 per unit. And this is what we're looking at for revenues. Again, primary territory is US, expecting to launch the initial products in 2030 and looking to ramp up within 5 years over $1 billion annually in sales. Outside of the US, starting earlier, launching in end of 2027, initial sales really starting in 2028, looking to hit over $100 million within several years of launch outside of the US. So in summary, look, through surgical adhesions, we have a large total addressable market, so over $11 billion potentially worldwide. Very compelling, both safety and efficacy data, clinical data within these patients. Intellectual property is incredibly strong, providing us with exclusivity. And then very clearly defined upcoming milestones. So top-line data from the Joe Code orthopedic knee clinical trial, top-line data from the IP Code gynecological clinical trial as well. And so we've raised, as Tian hinted at, like 22 million in equity, 18 million in non-dilutive, 40 million in total. So today we're doing a $5 million fundraise. Again, the key outcomes from this are provides a clinical trial data readouts from both the Joe Code for knee and the gynecological for the IP Code, and results in initial distribution deals and sales in the second half of 2027. This also provides over 2 years of runway where we actually end up then with the sales within less than that 2 years. So super happy to answer any questions that folks have.
Great. Chris, we do have a couple questions in the chat box. And for those of you who are interested, you can type your own question in or raise your hand and we'll call on you, or you can direct message us. But I wanted to launch an investor poll here. So if you can indicate your interest level in the company, this is confidential. Very interested, let's follow up a meeting. Interested, would like more information. Not interested, but you may know some investors who might be, or not interested at all. And let's shoot for 95% participation, please. This is confidential. Your response will only be shared with the company, and it's very helpful for the company when they're doing their follow-ups. Okay, Chris, first question I got here is, can you walk us through the primary and secondary endpoints for both IP Code and Joe Code pivotal trials? How do they align with regulatory expectations in each geography?
You bet. I'm just going to reshare the deck so you can see this.
And then kind of a related question, Chris, how are you quantifying adhesion reduction? What imaging or scoring system are being used and how objective are they? But go ahead and address the first one.
Yeah, and so for the group, as I'm sure you're aware, like these are very insightful questions because they're critical as to how do we get that approval, right?
Yeah.
And also ties in with reimbursement at the end of the day. So let's start with the Joe Code. So this is the pilot clinical trial for the US. So what's fantastic about this clinical trial is the primary efficacy endpoint timing is at 12 weeks, so like 3 months after the surgery. So it's a fast clinical trial, which is great. The primary efficacy endpoint is the range of motion. And so using a goniometer, the patient's range of motion of their knee is measured and it's compared with what was that range of motion prior to the surgery, and it's compared with these very recent historical controls. And just to add some more light there, there's a fantastic surgical center that we're working with. They were a key surgical center in a very large separate clinical trial. There were a total of 1,200 patients. They had 50 patients within their center that had exactly the same surgery but didn't get the Joe code. So it's a really great way to get a lot of controls but not have an expensive overhead to do that. So primary efficacy endpoint is range of motion. Secondary efficacy endpoints then are the patient-reported outcome measures. And so we're using 3 different standard patient-reported outcome measures. There's a general one and then 2 that are more specific. And so then let's chat about the IP code. So IP code, again, what's exciting about this is the primary efficacy endpoint timing is 12 weeks post-surgery. So the patient comes in for the surgery, they receive our product or blinded placebo control solution, they go back 12 weeks later, they do a second look laparoscopy. And these primary efficacy outcomes, these are really key because in the past, there's been a little bit of, I'm just going to call it smoke and mirrors from some companies. They would look for like tenacity, kind of what's that strength of the adhesion, and try and do some scoring around that. Really, what the regulators want to see and what the surgeons want to see is what is the number of patients that are completely free of adhesions, okay? And they want to see what is the average number of adhesions per patient. So these are the 2 co-primary efficacy endpoints for the gynecological clinical trial. Again, secondary endpoints are primarily around the safety, and so patient-reported outcomes, of course, we measure a whole bunch of other things as well. Importantly, around the design then, are designed for the pivotal clinical trials in the US, both for the knee orthopedic pivotal clinical trial and for the gynecologic pivotal clinical trial. It's exactly the same as the pilots. The timing, the primary and secondary efficacy endpoints are all the same so that we will not have any surprises when we do those pivotal clinical trials in the US. Tian, do you feel that answered those 2 questions?
I think so.
Great.
Related question would be like, how are you quantifying the adhesion reduction? And I think you talked about the imaging and scoring systems for range of motion, for example, but do you measure the adhesion reduction, or are you only looking at endpoints?
Right. So what we do in this IPICO gynecological clinical trial is during the primary surgery, they're coming in for endometriosis. They may or may not have adhesions that are a result of the inflammation from the endometriosis. If they do have adhesions, those will be lysed, they'll be cut apart. Okay, so then 12 weeks later, the patients come back. The way we quantify the adhesions is the first surgery is videotaped. The second laparoscopy is videotaped. And so they videotaped 16 different sites within the abdominal pelvic cavity, and it's a is there adhesion there, yes or no? And so we're looking for 2 things. One is it 0 adhesions at all sites, so the patient is completely adhesion free, yes or no? And secondly, we look at what number out of those 16 different separate sites have adhesions or not, and that provides us with an average or a mean number of the adhesions. And so then we total that up within each group. And so, of course, we're expecting to see, based on our many, many preclinical studies in animal models of gynecological and abdominal, as well as orthopedic, which translate very well into humans, we're expecting to see a higher number of patients that are completely adhesion-free within the IP code treated group compared with a lower number, maybe not any, that are completely adhesion-free within the control group. And I'll just share an example. So, as you know, we're not approved yet, but yeah, we've had an excellent track record in obtaining compassionate use approvals, expanded access approvals for both Joe code and recently with IP code. So this poor woman who was coming in for a gynecological surgery, this is a very complex surgery that the surgeons obtain compassionate use, expanded access approvals to use the IP code. She was on the table for 3 hours. Most of that was cutting apart adhesions, and she had adhesions because she had this huge 11-inch endometrioma. The rest of the surgery then was dealing with that endometrioma. The surgeons were super excited about how fast and easy it was to push into that IP code. They gave us a beautiful quote for the press release. And in these patients, like they almost always have new adhesions and reformed adhesions, where they've cut the adhesions apart. They actually grow back and they grow tighter and stronger. They're worse. However, 6 weeks after the surgery in which the patient got the IP code at the end, the surgeons came back. They did an ultrasound. They saw no new adhesions. They saw no reformation adhesions. It's only one patient, but it's almost unheard of in this type of patient to not have any adhesions. So, and those efficacy data line up super well, again, with all the many predictive animal studies that we've done in the gynecological and abdominal adhesion models.
Got it. I know Yi had a question on IP, but I had another question here regarding how does your liquid barrier perform in complex surgical environments with bleeding, fluid exposure, and movement versus the legacy film products?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in our animal models, this is a very well accepted rabbit model of both gynecological and abdominal adhesions. We have bleeding, and so performs very well. I might we're doing okay for time. I'll share a just a couple of data slides. I think that'll help the group to visualize the answer to this question. All right, can folks see the inside of the rabbit here in this slide?
Yes.
Yeah, great. So I'll walk you through this model. So in this model, we open up the rabbit and we injure reproducibly the uterine horn here and here. On the other side, it's scraped and then rubbed with the gauze. We get petechial hemorrhage, bleeding of the horn. It's 4 centimeters long for each horn. We also similarly injure the sidewall behind the horn. Again, it's 4 centimeters long, and we get bleeding. Like that first layer is taken off till we get some bleeding. The horns that are sutured at each end here and here to the sidewall. So I don't know if you can see them in the video, but the horn's kind of flopping around at the end of the surgery. And same for the other horn here and here suture. When we come back 2 weeks later and open up the animals, in the control animals, these horns are so severely attached to the sidewall because of the adhesions. The only way to separate them is to either tear them apart or cut them apart. It's very reproducible. It's a fantastic model. Um, um, and then in the ARC treated, the IP code treated animals, over half the animals completely adhesion free. So you can see here the surgeon's easily able to insert their blunt instrument between the horn and the abdominal sidewall. What this doesn't show is there's actually a much larger surface area within that abdominal pelvic cavity. Just opening up the rabbits, we get adhesions outside of the injured area, typically around 3 to 5 adhesions in the control animals. Again, in the IP coat treated animals, over half the animals are completely adhesion free. So graphically, what this looks like, I'll walk you through this here. So the blue bars here, these are the adhesions between the tissues that we've injured, the uterine horns on the sidewall. The green bars are adhesions throughout the largest surface area, the rest of the abdominal pelvic cavity. In the control animals, we get lots of adhesions everywhere. Again, it's a great reproducible model. When we place one of the film products like Film, and this is a good product, but it only works where it's placed. It reduces the adhesions when we place it between the injured uterine horns and the sidewall, but it does nothing to reduce adhesions throughout the larger surface area, the rest of the abdominal pelvic cavity. There's a gel called Adspray marketed by Terumo in Japan. When we place it between the injured tissues, the uterine horn and the sidewall, it reduces adhesions. But of course, like the film, I mean, the gel really just provides a localized film in a way that's easier to apply. Again, it does nothing to prevent adhesions throughout the larger remainder surface area of the abdominal pelvic cavity. This was a low amount of our liquid medical device, and yet we still knocked down adhesions throughout the entire abdominal pelvic cavity. I'll show you one more data slide to put this into perspective. So I was talking about the woman who had the adhesions that were cut apart. She came back 6 weeks later, following the IP coat treatment at the end of the surgery, had no new adhesions, no reformation adhesions. Again, the reformation adhesions can often be worse than the original adhesions. So we did a study in rabbits in which we went and we did the surgeries, but we applied no treatment. We came back 2 weeks later and then applied either blinded placebo-controlled solution or the IP coat, and then came back another 2 weeks later. In the control animals, we had a huge amount of reformation adhesions. None of the animals were adhesion free. in the IP coat treated animals, 9 out of 12 of the animals had no reformation of adhesions. We completely knocked down the reformation adhesions. So just fantastic efficacy data. Again, this rabbit model of the gynecological abdominal adhesions is very translatable into humans. And this is, again, what we saw was no reformation or no new adhesions in this single patient that we treated following her complex surgery. Does that answer that question?
I think so. You had a question about your IP. There's 7 patent families. How many patents in total?
So, yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, if you add up all the countries, we probably have at least 30 patents issued, but I think sometimes there's a little smoke and mirrors there. What we're very careful to say is, look, we have 7 separate patent families. So, for example, in the US, we have 5 already granted, right? 1 patent from 5 different families, completely different types of families, different composition of matter claims. In Japan, it's similar. We have 5 different patents granted, all with different composition of matter claims. We've got 4 or 5 granted in China. Other patents are granted and are pending worldwide. It's incredibly strong intellectual property. And to put it into perspective, our council, which is King IP Law, based out of northern Seattle, the lead lawyer there, Josh, he has invested cash into the company 3 times, including in our most recent financing. So, like I mean, he knows that IP better than anybody. Very strong believer in the intellectual property that's been granted to the company. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. We have a couple questions here, but I want to go to Lowell's question because it talks about the therapy itself. Should these therapies be administered prophylactically? Lowell, do you mean before surgery, or what do you mean by that? If you can unmute. Oh, you're on mute, Lowell. You're still on mute.
He's looking for the button.
Unmute.
There we go. Oh, you remuted, Lowell. You got to press that button once more.
Okay, good now.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
No, I'm thinking, well, we have a surgery here. It's in the abdominal cavity. We know that is prone to adhesions. Should it be standard procedure to administer these therapies prophylactically so that there are no adhesions in the when the stomach is closed up?
Yes.
And I think there is the biggest win, because you'll have regular, predictable revenues, large revenues, easily reimbursable, because it's a prophylactic procedure, and that, you know, it's like a vaccine that everyone has to take. It's a tremendous opportunity.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lowell.
I think, Jen, what we're going to do is you do the pitch at the beginning, and we'll get Lowell to do the pitch at the end, hey?
Okay. Well, I already gave part of it now.
Had a couple of questions here. Regarding partnerships, can you give us a sense of the structure, upfront milestones, commercialization rights, and what it signals to other strategics?
Yeah, so we currently have no partnerships in place. Just to be clear, what's been really exciting for the company is over the last 12 months, as we've had these clinical data coming in, which are very compelling, we've had initial and then follow-on meetings with key partners that, you know, are looking to partner with us after we get the clinical trials, the pilots done, and would be fantastic acquisition partners. So, for example, Baxter is a great example. They love what we're doing. We've met with the venture, the corporate, including their advanced surgery leadership team. And these are just very positive calls. And they are both in the orthopedics and the abdominal gynecological space. Stryker as well, you know, met with the corporate development and then some very specialized teams within different types of surgeries. They, of course, are in orthopedics. They're also, you know, do a lot with endoscopes. They're in that abdominal gynecological space as well. The list goes on and on. You know, Johnson & Johnson, MedTech, Medtronic, et cetera, et cetera. So there are a number of very large medical device companies that are in these spaces that are following us very closely. They're very keen to see the data from these 2 pilot clinical trials. Yeah.
Yep, definitely. And we have a couple other questions involving valuation and exit. One is, what are the clear valuation inflection points over the next 12 to 24 months in terms of data readouts, approvals, partnerships? How do you see each step impacting the enterprise value? That's a
You
tough
bet. And
question.
I like that question. It's good because, of course, in thinking and caring about our investors, we plan out, what's this raise, what's the next raise, what's that bump up going to be, right? Um, I'm just going to share this slide that we only briefly covered in the first presentation. I think it'll help again paint a picture for folks. So what's key here for inflection points are top line data, right? Data showing primarily safety and then showing a trend towards efficacy in these two pilot clinical trials. So that's a key inflection point. Um, and so again, we expect top line data second half of this year from the knee, in the first half of next year for the gynecological. We expect to get approvals outside of the US in the second half of 2027, starting in these key territories like Australia, certain territories like Germany within Europe, assuming things settle down, even key territories within the Middle East, and then initiating sales for the company. Um, the top line clinical data, again, is what these larger studies are looking for. So bear with me, I'm just going to walk backwards here. What we see doing is a larger financing after we have those top line clinical data in place, okay? And we're looking at 50 million with a pre-money valuation of 70 million. That provides all of the ammunition that we need and a really good
Wow.
buffer to do the pivotal clinical trials in the US. And so we end up with two class 3 PMA approvals. One is for Joe Coat for the orthopedic, and the other is for IP Coat for gynecological. So we've got two indication, provides more than 5 years of runway. So it's more than enough buffer to get us past that point where we have those approvals. And we see that as a takeout point. And so we are working towards a valuation of an exit when we're taken out by a Stryker or a Baxter of 1 to 3 billion, and we're pushing for that 2030 timeline as we have those approvals from the U.S. coming in. Those are the biggest value drivers. In the meantime, we have these really great value drivers of the top line clinical data from the two pilot clinical trials that we're running now, and we're expecting those data within the next 12 months. And so the 5 million that we're raising to help fund for those top line data, that's priced at a discount to the larger financing. So it's a pre-money of 45 million.
Got it. And then there's a related question about exit pathway. I think you answered, strategic acquisitions definitely an option if things go well. And then they were saying,
So I might just add a little more there. So yes, 90% chance as we get the US pivotals done and we have those data in hand and we're applying for the approvals, we're just going to be taken out by one of these larger med techs that can turn around and start selling the product. Having said that, we're big believers in optionality, and thanks in part with Andrew, we have amazing relationships with 13 or 14 key investment banks. Many of them are New York based, and this ranges from H.C. Wainwright to Oppenheimer to Sumitomo to, Evercore. The list goes on and on. And so we have these relationships. We're working on them now. We're too early to go public right now. Yet when we have the data in hand, we're working on the pivotals. If the markets were right and the demand was there, that is an option for the company for going public at that time. In the meantime, we've been developing these relationships with a very strong, with these multitude of investment banks. So if we chose to do that, we have that option.
yes. And then in terms of, so the question was, do you see what's the most realistic, a strategic acquisition or a stage partnership? And what are the comps that you believe best reflect the potential outcome for ARC?
Yeah, so in the wound healing space, there are a number of comps that, as they have approval and they're initiating sales, they're taken out over that $1 billion. So those are really good comps. I'll give you a very direct comp. So Seprafilm, I talked about that as a competitor. This is one of these films like the size of a post-it note that is approved only for open abdominal surgeries in the US, placed into that abdominal space. Um, and this just speaks to how old these technologies are. You know, they were approved in 96, right? And this is still state of the art, right? Worldwide, including the US, this film, right, that is difficult and challenging to place, really tough to try and use it through a laparoscope, provides only partial efficacy because it only covers a tiny fraction. And off patent, they were acquired. So the Sepra film was acquired by Baxter for 350 million in 2020. And what's interesting is in 2012, sales for Sepra film peaked at almost 600 million. And that's when most of the surgeries were open abdominal. But since then, the surgeries have changed where about 90% are laparoscopic. So their sales reduced to 150 million per year. They were still taking out 350 million as an off-patent, branded product. And of course, what's great is our initial indication for gynecologic, that's laparoscopic, right? For orthopedic, that will be arthroscopic, right? These are huge, huge indications, right? So we'll have 90% of that gynecological, laparoscopic market as the approval for IP code. It's several million surgeries a year.
Got it. Well, I don't have any more questions in queue here. Does anyone else have anything? We do have some time for additional questions. You can raise your hand and we'll call on you, or you can type the questions right into the chat box if you'd like. So it doesn't look like we have any more questions. I thought it was very comprehensive, Chris. Do you guys have any last words? Just to remind everybody, we'll forward an email link and so on. Yes, John.
Ken, what's the minimum?
Yeah, minimum is 50,000 is the minimum. Yeah.
Yeah,
not sure sorry, not sure if Lowell's trying to say something. You still on mute, Lowell? Still on mute.
When is the last financing? The 50
Okay,
million?
I'm off mute now. In my opinion, the 50 is really a great entry point for an investor, for an individual investor. That's very smart. But what's interesting is, are you going to have any link between this investment and the 50 at the 77 valuation?
So we're doing them as two separate financings. So this is a standalone 5 million at the 45 million pre-money valuation. And then of course there's a nice jump up there to the 50 million at the 70 million pre-money valuation. Yeah.
Okay, but you wouldn't accord any special rights if the initial 5 million round were a substantial number.
If people wanted to invest more than 5 million at this point, I've been around long enough, Lowell, that we would take it. If people wanted to put more money, like they want to do 6, 7, 10 million, we will just do it and get it done. Absolutely.
All right, that was my question.
Always take the money, Lowell. Always.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
take the money when you don't need
for the investors. Yeah, it's great for the investors because the valuation is very reasonable. And it's great for the company because we just keep motoring ahead with those funds. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And Chris, when's the 50 million to come? What's your timing on that?
So we believe that will be done after we get the top line data from the 2 clinical trials. And again, top line data from JOCO second half of this year, from the IPCO first half of next year. So that'll be at least 12 months.
At least 12 months. Thank you.
Yeah, that's our
very good timeline.
Yeah. So what I would say to folks is, look, we'd love to have you participate. If you have other questions, you want to set up a separate call with me, I'm super happy to do a call individually with you, and or if you want to bring any other investors, happy to do that. You've got my email. Happy to make sure you get a deck if that's helpful to you as well. So yeah, just would encourage folks to reach out to Tien or to myself or both of us, and let's set up a next call and look towards getting this done.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks Lowell. Thanks, John.
Yeah.
We're going to follow up with everybody who was on this call, as well as a couple
Thank
people
you.
make it.
Thank you, Tim.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Lowell.
Tien.
Thanks, John. Yeah, we'll follow up with everybody with the link to the recording, as well as contact information for Chris and Andrew, and definitely Very generous offer there, Chris, to meet individually with investors. So yeah, with that, you guys have the last word. Andrew, Chris, any final thoughts or comments?
Andrew?
Well, you know what? Chris made me a lot of money the last time. I'm sure this is going to be a big win, in my opinion. I do love the greenfield opportunity in terms of the orthopedic space. There is no competition out there, so I think there's lots of upside on that front. The fact that we're not chewing into OR time is very significant in this current landscape. And frankly, you're betting on a great jockey. He has some great generals behind him, including Bob Litchfield, who's the president of the Canadian Orthopedic Association. So very excited, and thank you everyone for the time here today.
Yeah, I appreciate your interest, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. We'll be back in touch.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.